Hello and welcome to Chaos Knowledge, where headlines meet depth and noise gives way to nuance. I'm your host, Usama Nizamani. Today, I'm joined by one of the most rising stars of Pakistan's journalistic fraternity. He happens to follow the foreign policy issues with a very keen and close eye. Right now, he's serving as Pakistan's bureau chief and international correspondent for Asia One News. My guest today, you've guessed it right, is Mr. Anas Mallick. Anas, welcome to Chaos Knowledge. Thank you for joining us today, Anas.
Thank you so much for having me here, Osama. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Okay, Anas, let's start our conversation with my first question. And I think it's important to sort of like draw the context here. Ever since we've seen the Trump administration come in power, we're seeing the United States take a backseat in terms of assuming more responsibility when it comes to security and defense related issues. The recent strikes by Israel on Doha, on Hamas's leadership, we have actually seen, that has kind of like catapulted kind of like a major strategic change in the region. Saudi Arabia and Pakistan have now concluded a defense pact with each other. Let me ask you this question. Why, where, what and how exactly did this security pact come about? Was it something which was a product in the making, which took about several weeks, or did it just come about as a result of this trigger that took place a few weeks ago?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me again, Osama. Just a bit of context. I mean, since you mentioned about the security pact, and it is talk of the town. This particular security pact, as you've already said, that it comes in the backdrop of that growing Israeli aggression on the Middle East, the assault on Middle East at large, be that be Yemen, be that be Syria, be that be Iran, and now Qatar. Very, very recently, this defense pact is a byproduct of it. I will not say that it is a byproduct directly of the attack on Qatar, but it has definitely accelerated it. The need for such a defense pact was accelerated by the attack on Qatar by Israel, but the reckless attack, as it's being said, by Pakistan. This particular agreement had been in the works for at least, I can tell you based on my understanding of having spoken to people on background, for at least over a year. But it was, at a snail's pace. Of course, after the India-Pakistan skirmishes, things got a bit accelerated. Things got a bit of an uptake. That would be the right way to put it. But the major kick or the major boost to this security pact, or towards the finalization and conclusion of the security pact, was this Israel's reckless, unprovoked unilateral military aggression against Doha on the 9th of September. That is where the need came in. And there's a bit of context that way. As you mentioned about the Trump administration, let's not forget that both Doha, or both Qatar and Saudi Arabia, are largely defended by the US. Largely. When I use the word largely, it's not that they do not have a defense of their own, but it says that there is an illusion or semblance of foreign defense factories and provided defense equipment. And I think that illusion was largely challenged when Israel did what it did on the 9th of September in Doha, which led to the killing of, or shahadat, as we say, of civilians. So I think, to my knowledge, not just that I think, to what I know, is that this particular events, they accelerated things towards the conclusion of this pact. Now, the contours of this pact are very, very, very interesting, and I cannot help but overestimate on this, because while and it's already been written quite a lot on it. that the defense of it would be a shared responsibility, deterrence would be a shared responsibility, and it would also be that an attack on either of the countries would be considered as an attack on both the countries, and so on. But I think the other interesting part of this is it's not just limited to that deterrence defense spectrum. It is also limited to the protection mechanism. And now, when I use the word defense and protection, it might sound the same, but it's not really exactly the same, right? There've been talks of Pakistani military possibly being deployed as well.
So I want to, Anas, I want to precisely come on that question. As they, and now for a moment, I want you to put your analyst hat on. From the press release, I don't think, and I think you would also agree, we haven't really gotten a lot of details out of that so far. But as they say, the proof of pudding is in the eating. So let me ask you, what would this defense cooperation really look like? Would it really mean, are we seeing, an increase in the footprint of the deployment of the Pakistani troops in Saudi Arabia? Are we seeing, increased cooperation between the air forces as well as the navies of the two countries, or increased, training capacity for the Saudi military personnel? How would this? Could you sort of like unpack it for our audience? What would it really look like when it comes to or boils down to the details?
I think it's a culmination of all of what you just mentioned. It's not limited to one particular component. Yes, there will be increased intelligence mechanism sharing. Yes, there will be increased capacity building, if that is the right word, on amongst all the tri-services, and in fact for intelligence level as well, capacity building on the intelligence level side as well. With regards to boots on the ground or not, the impression, and I'm very careful in choosing my words, that the impression that we've got, I've got, having spoken to people on background, is that yes, the protection of the two of the holiest sites in Islam, that would be now a responsibility of Pakistan, and by virtue of that, the Pakistani armed forces. Of course, the finer details have been kept very close to the chest, and I understand rightly so, because it's shrouded in secrecy and mystery that ways. But when you talk about Navy, Air Force, Army, the key pointer or rider or driver, however you want to, which depends on how you want to see it or how you want to perceive it, is that all three forces will be held to up their capacity by their Pakistani counterparts. So if it's Navy, the Pakistani Navy will help them. If it's the Air Force, the Pakistani Air Force will help them capacity build, and vice versa. Similarly, if it's the military, if it's the Pakistan Army, then they will help Saudi Army and Saudi cadets as well. What would be the numbers? What would be the quantity? What sort of training? Of course, these are operational details which I would not be privy to for obvious reasons. But that being said, I think to fixate it on any one particular topic or on in any one particular direction would be wrong. When I say it would be wrong, it is because it's coming under the ambit, or as I said, since we added in the first answer, we added a bit of context. This is a direct indictment on the part of Saudi Arabia on the lack of trust it has on US given defense equipment. And that, of course, in my opinion, it stems from what happened in Doha on the 9th of September. Because if it can happen in Doha, then it can happen in Riyadh. God forbid, of course. If it can happen anywhere else, wherever the US has given security guarantees. So I think that is where Pakistan's role as a net security provider in the region, or net security stabilizer, more than security provider, and as a net security stabilizer, that is where that is what comes in. And that's something Pakistan has effectively demonstrated as well during the skirmishes with India earlier this year in the month of May, April and May, when we saw the two countries coming to, they were at war, that 86-hour war. Now there have been books written on it as well. So yeah, that's how I look at it, Sama.
Now, before I come to that question of being the net security provider or stabilizer, uh, you interestingly did speak about the two holy mosques, and Pakistan is likely to be extended with that responsibility of taking care of the security of these two holiest sites in the religion of Islam. Now, my question is: would that mean that we will be seeing construction of new military bases in these two holy cities of Mecca and Medina as well as a result of that?
I think it's a bit too early to say that. I think there will be my understanding, purely my understanding, not my information, is that while there can be a temporary deployment and a temporary deployment, because it's often it is said that naysayers, they attribute quite a lot of naysayers being naysayers, the negativity around the Pakistani military. I think the right word would be that it would be a temporary deployment until the capacity of the US, of the Saudi or the royal forces is built up. Pakistan will be having some sort of should be having some sort of operational oversight. And that's it. When we say the protection of the holiest sites, the two holiest sites in the religion of Islam is Pakistan's responsibility. Firstly, they will do it in practicality by being deployed on the ground, but it would not be like an indefinite, unending deployment. What would be the mode or modus of that deployment? Again, because the details are yet to emerge. The Prime Minister is already traveling. Uh, we've had the conclusion, I mean, very far recently. So the final details will emerge as and when the Prime Minister comes back to Pakistan, because he's on a 3-country visit. You saw he was in Saudi, then he was in London, then in USA, and so on and so forth. So the final details will emerge as and when the Prime Minister comes back to Islamic Republic of Pakistan.
All right. So, Anas, that brings me to my next question, and that is about the Pakistan assuming that role, or sort of like assuming greater responsibility under its decades-old role of net security provider in the region of Gulf and Middle East. The question is, would now this also invite or perhaps motivate other members of the Gulf states such as Qatar, Bahrain? I'm not sure about Oman though, but would it also be encouraging other states to sort of expect Pakistan to be coming in that role and perhaps signing similar agreements with them as well?
I think yes. I think yes. Because and I would not be surprised if Qatar also jumps in and does a similar agreement. Remember, the Pakistani Prime Minister, Shehbaz Sharif, was very recently in Doha, not once, but twice in less than a week's time. Days after the Israeli aggression against Doha, he was there on the 11th of September. And then after that, he was again there on the 15th of September, and accompanying him was the Pakistani Army Chief Field Marshal Usama Nizamani. If there is one thing that these visits they signified is that it was the brotherhood, the camaraderie, the value to the relationship. The Prime Minister literally just flew 6 hours in that round trip to hold a 2-hour meeting and then come back. So he spent more time in the air and in his airplane than in Doha on the ground, right? And this is I'm talking to you the meeting on the 11th of September on Thursday. And then the following on the 15th of September as well, when we saw that the Prime Minister went to Doha. So I think I would not be surprised that if Qatar jumps in, I'm not sure about Oman, Kuwait, or Bahrain, as you said, but I would, as I said, I would particularly not be surprised. And why I say this is because both Qatar and Riyadh or Saudi Arabia, they have not just enjoyed historical, fraternal, and all those. I mean, I can say things, good words from the press releases, as they say, but in actuality, they've been time-tested friends of Pakistan. They've been time-tested friends when it comes to economic stability in the country. But they've been time-tested friends when it comes to holding Pakistan's hand in times of Pakistan's need. Be when it comes to the issue of deferred oil payments. I mean, or Pakistani resource at large. We've already seen that there's been sort of a hiccup. Well, hiccup is also an understatement, but a downward trajectory of relations of countries within the region when it comes to Gulf, particularly when it comes to Doha or Qatar. We saw that saga of where 8 former Indian Navy personnel who were sentenced to death and then pardoned through a Qatari Emir executive order. So there is lack of trust, and New Delhi's lack of clarity on how to balance their relationship, maybe if balance is the right word, or how to mitigate through these murkier waters. That is something that is prompting and signaling Gulf countries, in my opinion, to come to Pakistan, because at least Pakistan would not go on to remain in ambiguity, especially when it comes to the issue of Israel. There's absolute clarity. It's part of Pakistan's vision statement when it was laid, when the foundation was laid. It's the fundamental or one of the cornerstones of Pakistan's foreign policy. It was said by the founding father of the country, of the nation as well. And I think that's why the Gulf side would ideally want to shift goalposts because of one thing. There might not be economic stability. Fine. There might not be political stability in the country. That's also okay. But if there is one thing that's quite stable, that's certain, it is that Pakistan will stand shoulder to shoulder when it comes to defense capabilities. And that is what matters the most for these countries. Sama?
So let me draw your attention to another important question. The United States and Saudi Arabia have concluded an arms deal worth 142 billion US dollars in May 2025. It was barely 3 days after US had actually brokered a ceasefire between India and Pakistan. How do you think Washington is likely to view this defense agreement that has been reached by both Riyadh and Islamabad?
Well, for starters, if you read the Financial Times article, that goes on to signify, again, at the cost of sounding like a broken record, the lack of trust that the Saudi side has. To quote the Financial Times, Washington was informed by Riyadh only after it had signed the defense agreement. Right? So Washington was not taken in the loop. They might have had intelligence reports. I'm not denying that the US was not in the know-how, but being directly in the know-how and being told or having learned of being in the know-how, and by virtue of that of being in know-how, are two different things. So that's what my perspective strictly is. That the US going forward, the Prime Minister is due to meet President Trump, and likely to meet President Trump on the sidelines of the UNGA. It is likely to be a bilateral meeting. And if that materializes, which is in all likelihood, it will materialize, to expect that there will not be a US reaction. I mean, even if it's scaled down, there would be some reaction. Let's not forget, it was Donald Trump who was standing in Saudi Arabia days after he brokered that ceasefire and said that he would want the Pakistani Prime Minister and the Indian Prime Minister, he would want to dine out and sort out their differences on a dinner date. That's what he said, right? It was in Saudi Arabia. And months later, that particular country where he was standing, perhaps the most powerful person on planet Earth, someone who he thought they were in their backyard, they've been slipped away like sand. So there will definitely be a reaction. What sort of reaction? Would it be welcomed? Would it be seen with skepticism? Would it be seen with pervasive or pervasive oversight? Again, it's a bit too early to say that. Because I said, since the agreements just happened and the details are yet to formally emerge, so unless in the next 24, 48, 72, whatever hours before this proposed President Trump and Shehbaz Sharif meeting, in case if there are drastic changes on the ground, let's say Pakistani troops are deployed and things basically go down south, and people start noticing that, then of course the reaction would be predictable. But I personally don't think so that any such move will be this accelerated. That is the right word. Any such move will be accelerated that 4 days and there is a change on the ground, 4 days that there is deployment, 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, whatever.
Anas, that brings me to another important question, and that has to deal with Pakistan-US ties. We've seen previous and the ongoing administration which has levied sanctions against Pakistani companies for continuing to what it terms as unsafeguarded nuclear and ballistic missile program. When Reuters had actually approached a Saudi official to comment on this very particular development, whether this defense agreement would include a possible nuclear umbrella being provided by Islamabad, the official actually responded by saying this is a comprehensive, I'm quoting him, this is a comprehensive defensive agreement that encompasses all military means. So my question is, do you think Islamabad is likely to extend its nuclear deterrent to Riyadh?
A policy to deploy Pakistani nukes on, or there would be an understanding to deploy Pakistani nukes on Saudi soil. I don't foresee that happening at all, because that would invite more scrutiny, more sanctions. B, that would invite a lot of eyeballs, and C, it would invite undue criticism, undue scrutiny, undue counterchecks. And Islamabad knows one thing. Islamabad knows that this is a topsy-twisted or pivoted world right now, pivoted geopolitical landscape that's there, and not just regional but global landscape. And it does not, the last thing that it would want to be under talks when it comes to its nuclear program. So Islamabad, while you've quoted the Saudi official that it encompasses all sides, I personally don't think that it would be under that umbrella. But having that illusion, and I carefully use the word, having that illusion that yes, in case if something goes wrong, God forbid, on the two of the holiest sites or the Saudi Arabia at large, the illusion that yes, we have a country on our backup that has nukes, that too would do wonders going forward. Sama. Unpredictability. Sorry to interrupt, because there's a lot of unpredictability and surety, and since we started this conversation saying that I said that while this agreement is shrouded in secrecy and mystery, so as long as it remains shrouded in secrecy and mystery, I mean, we're all up in the guess game, or even if not in the guess game, even if we know information, we would not be able to relay the finer details of the information because, understandably enough, that's my take.
Completely understandable. Now, Anas, you as someone who's been associated with one of the leading news agencies of India itself. Now, let me draw your attention to a recent statement that has actually come out from the Ministry of External Affairs in New Delhi, taking quite a quick note of this development that has taken place. It has said that and the Indian Ministry of External Affairs has actually responded the Indian government's position that, and again I'm quoting this, that it was aware of this development and had been under consideration between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. Furthermore, it also added that it will study the implications of this development for our national security. It went on to add, government remains committed to protecting India's national interests. And now, on the other hand, the same Saudi official who was being consulted earlier by Reuters, speaking on India-Saudi ties, had actually said they will continue to grow their bilateral relationship and seek to contribute to regional peace in whichever way they can. Do you think India will respond to this development with its own move by co-opting, say, Tel Aviv into a similar agreement? How do you see India sort of, interpreting this and sort of executing its move in the coming weeks and months?
Well, I mean, because that's a lot of questions in one question. So I would just break down first the Indian statement and what the Indian side could have possibly meant. Of course, I'm not their spokesperson, so this would be just fine. Either I think when they say that they were quote unquote aware that this development had been under consideration, it basically means that either the Saudis were keeping them in the loop, either the Israelis through their intelligence mechanisms were keeping them in the loop, either the Iranians were keeping in the loop. We can skip the US part because the US, Washington themselves were informed, as I quoted Financial Times, FT, only after the agreement was signed. So it could be basically anything can be up for grabs that ways, right? There are many such possibilities. Maybe they would have gotten intelligence, whatever. Basically, it's a vast field that ways, and the guess game is quite huge. To the second part of your question, India already has an alliance, a strategic level alliance with Israel. And during the 4-day war between India and Pakistan, and even before that, when India tried to come into Pakistan with those Rafales and everything, and on the 29th of April, and they were deterred from entering and so on. I mean, if there is one thing that we saw was that there was increased coordination between India and Israel. The use of head-on drones, the head-off drones, made in Israel, manufactured in Israel, that goes on. And the way how they were being used on Pakistani solutions, or they were tried to be used rather on Pakistani solutions, it goes on to show that there is already a strategic level partnership between India and Israel. So one should not be surprised that they more so formalize it and do it into a joint security pact, a bilateral security pact on the margins of what Pakistan and Saudi Arabia just did. Having said that, I think it would not be happening just this soon. It would just not be happening just this soon. There's a lot that's going on, at least in Israel. They have a lot on their plate, both internally, domestically, and externally as well. And of course, with the ceasefire and Gaza hostages deal and Gaza's invasion and the ground assault and everything taken into account, I personally don't foresee that there would be a deal between India and Israel along the margins to counter the Saudi-Pakistan defense agreement anytime really, really soon. I do not see that happening.
Let's speak of another important country in the region, and that happens to be Iran. In the recent years, we've seen both Iran and Saudi Arabia have had their own history of bilateral tensions, and then we've also seen earlier last year Islamabad and Tehran go to sort of like a loggerheads, with their own limited skirmish that they underwent in January 2024. So let me ask you, how is Tehran likely to view this development? Is it likely to leave them more paranoid, or is it, given the recent developments in the last 2 years, is it likely to leave them in a slightly better off position? How do you see this development when Tehran's perspective is to be considered?
When you say Tehran might have paranoia, is it in the context of the Pakistan Saudi deal?
Yes. Yes.
I don't think so. I personally do not think so. I think Iran and Saudi are far beyond that point of having skepticism on either of the sides, and credits to China over there. The role of China, of course, in the region has been more of a reformist, and we've seen that very recently during the Cambodia-Thailand conflict as well. While the US President Donald Trump was trying to take credit or claiming credit for everything, It was China that sat down with that made Cambodia and Thailand sit down, and we like, you guys need to behave like adults and talk it out and make sure that the ceasefire holds on. Similarly, we saw that the unification or getting the Palestinians under one roof, that was also done by China. We saw that the concept of this Arab-Islamic summit and the first of its meetings after the 7th of October, that was done by China as well. And then, of course, the Iran-Saudi rapprochement, that too was done by China. So, I mean, and China is an ally to all three. When I say three, there are three parties here. The Saudi Arab's a party, Iran's a party, Pakistan's a party. China is a friend, is a partner, is an ally, is an investor, uh, howsoever you want to put it. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, that's the bilateral agreement. The BRI is towards the Saudis would want to be part of it or are part of it. So that's cooperation over there. And the INSTC, the North-South Transport Corridor, that goes through, that is what the Iranian proposed route is. So, I mean, in that larger picture, if you draw it there, there is one constant. The projects might be different, but there is one constant, that is China, China, and China, and that's it. So for Iran, there would not be skepticism, but rather it would be more reassuring, because at least for Tehran now knows, or now believes, or would want to believe rather, that in case, if in the event of an Israeli aggression, the Israelis would not be able to come in from the Saudi airspace. Because previously we saw that when in the June skirmishes, there had been a lot of misreporting or attribution along that lines. So I think that's not going to that's sort of a relief for Tehran. For Tehran also, despite of what Pakistan and Tehran went through, the peekaboo of firing missiles at each other last year, January 2024, that you referred to, I think the lesson was very clear for Tehran, that Pakistan will safeguard its interests, national integrity and territorial sovereignty at all costs, regardless if you're India, regardless if you're Afghanistan, regardless if you're the brotherly nation of Iran. If you have trespassed into our territory, then we will give a befitting response. And that is the baseline, a borderline, a baseline that has been set by the policymakers. And so the Iranian skepticism, I personally don't foresee that there would be any. I mean, of course, you can't logic with the radicals, the right wingers, but the senior people, I won't foresee that there will be any sort of hiccups in Iran on Pakistan, Saudi Arabia bilateral security arrangement.
Anas, on that very note, I'd like to thank you for your time and for the insights that you've shared on this podcast episode today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to coming back soon. I really hope I made sense, and if I did, please listen to this podcast, give a thumbs up to Usama, and please subscribe to his network. I blabber a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anas, for your shout out, and we really look forward to having you again.